If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. We have a question from Kevin Maxwell. He's a good friend of mine. Did Jews always believe their books were historical? Since when did this belief begin? Should prophetic events being tied to astrotheological timelines call them into historical question? For example, the Jewish captivity in Babylon in Daniel's 70 weeks. Do you believe the Exodus was based in Egyptian history? Did the 40 to 70 day mummification, and then he put in quotation here, QRST, referring to the object buried, process proved premises for the 40 to 70 year period between the birth of Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem, or the Exodus motif? There's a lot here. How valid is the book God-Man, the Word made flesh, in the physiological theory of the Christ as a good secretion of the glands? Are there any good books on Egyptian geological physiology, i.e. the Nile being the circulatory system and chakra centers?
Most of that I'm totally unfamiliar with. But I think there's a couple of interesting things there in terms of what I know. Not that the rest is not interesting, but I just am not qualified to comment on them. But the idea of this, what QRST was it? Oh boy, I forget which one of the old-time mythicists said this, but that refers to the anointing of a mummy, among other things, apparently, and that Christ may have meant that because of the, I guess he made this connection, because of the obvious parallels between Jesus and Osiris. And that Jesus the Christ may mean Jesus the anointed one for resurrection. Isis anointed the corpse of Osiris and brought it back to life. And I can't help thinking that may well be, may not have anything to do with the king being anointed like in Judaism. Another thing there, I think the Exodus did not happen. There are gross implausibilities in the story itself, like the wilderness wandering. It takes them 40 years. Why? Well, I guess they could have gotten to Kadesh Barnea, at the rim of the promised land, quicker, and just turned away because they were scared, as it says. But it wouldn't have taken them long at all to get over the Sinai Peninsula. And it also says how many people were there, and it's filled with anachronisms. They have the portable temple in the form of the tabernacle, which they had to knock down and build up every day, which is just impossible. Where'd they get the materials for it? They given the population, that the figures they supply, the priests would have to be like killing sacrificial animals, several in a second. It's just ridiculous, and they didn't think of that because they're just sort of trying to symbolically retroject everything into the past, which doesn't mean they didn't think it happened. Apparently they did. And I really hesitate to say that the ancients were smarter than we give them credit for on a point like this, because given what they knew, there's no particular reason they should have thought that this or the Iliad were simply literary creations. There, as I say, with some ancients, like Origen, they figured out some things just couldn't be intended literally. But that wasn't the case with a lot of this stuff, and yet archaeology does really undermine the historicity of the whole narrative now. I mean, but we know things they wouldn't have. So it didn't happen in Egypt, but as I'm thinking of Giovanni Garbini and Philip R. Davies, they both suggest that there is an Egyptian origin of the story, in that Davies said that it might be that some Egyptian soldiers relocated to Canaan at some point. There'd been a long history, hundreds of years of, well, not them, but Egyptians who went over there, and that Egypt had ruled Canaan for hundreds of years prior to the date of Abraham and all that. So that might be the basis of it, but I kind of am more attractive to Garbini's theory that this whole thing came from the Jews in Ptolemaic Egypt after Alexander the Great, that it was a way of saying, all right, we don't all live there now, but like when they were there, they were saying, our ancestors brought the core colony of Jacob and his children in there, and so we are those people. We're really Egyptians too, in a sense. And just like Garbini said, the story of Abraham being from Chaldea or Babylon was kind of a bogus ancestral certificate credential for Babylonian Jews who remained there for much longer than the period that Jeremiah predicted of 70 years. It was only about 50 in terms of exiles coming back, but there were thriving Jewish settlements in Babylon for centuries thereafter. And so that the two stories of exiles, so to speak, one in Egypt, one in Babylon, probably are not really historical in character. Not that there weren't Jews in both, but because there were Jews in both under different circumstances than the stories depict, that's where the stories came from. A fictive origin for where the Egyptian Jews came from. Oh, it must have been the tribal patriarchs of their families. Or in Babylon, it must have been Father Abraham and so on. George Washington slept here.
Interesting, yeah. Make your father from the place,
Mm-hmm.
right? Abraham from Babylon and Moses from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.